we'll hit record. Welcome into the Newport This Week video podcast series. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Today we welcome Zita Cobb, who will be joining us in Newport next week at an event that I'll give you all the details about before we wrap up. But Zita, first of all, thanks so much for your time today. And let's get right into it. What can island communities like Aquidneck Island, home to Newport, Middletown, and Portsmouth, and the adjacent island communities like Jamestown that kind of function as one symbiotic ecosystem? What can they learn from your experience with Fogo Island?
Well, I think, Bill, well, first of all, I'm happy to be here chatting with you about this, and I'm looking forward to being there next week. I think islands can always learn from each other, and I think people on the mainlands, the big mainlands, can learn a lot from islands because islands are places we can see more clearly cause and effect. And so Fogo Island has a history that's actually about the same settlement history for settler people as your region. And so different starting points, slightly different industries, different wealth levels. We have on this island that I'm sitting on today, which is, by the way, almost 10 times bigger than Newport Island, let's say. Not that we're going to start comparing sizes here, but we have been more, I would say maybe more remote and more cut off from the mainland than the Newport region. And so I think what we have learned that is of use to other people is, what does it look like when it's just you and you have to figure it out by yourself?
Wow, what a powerful way to frame anything, but particularly when we look at Newport right now, and again, using that term loosely on an island and community-wide basis, not just the city, because there are separate problems to break down. But that mentality of, yes, Rhode Island is everything is proximate, usually takes 10 minutes to get anywhere, no doubt. But there is a sense of isolation on Aquidneck Island that is very real. There's sort of an anecdotal sense of, well, if you have to go over the bridges, that's maybe too far. And there's a pride that comes with that, and there are unique challenges with that. In your experience, why is it important for islanders to identify that at least on some level, there's a self-determination that is fundamental to that existence?
I think these questions that you're asking, Bill, really that you could frame them in this question, which is, how does the part belong to the whole?
Mm.
And so to look at Fogo Island, I'll know more about your region when I get there next week. But from here, I can tell you this island has 11 different communities. And so Fogo Island is a community of communities. How we belong to the big island of Fogo, I grew up in a place called Joe Bat's Arm, has been the matter of much debate and angst over the hundreds of years we've been here. And so we've come to learn that we identify culturally with the particular community we live in on this island, but we've come to understand deeply that our economic fate, FATE, is a shared one. And so how we come together to steward our economy really gets to the question of how one community belongs to the bigger island. And as importantly, maybe more importantly, how does this island belong to the region? How does this region belong to the province, or in your case, the state? And so I think there are just layers of belonging that we're navigating all the time. And they don't, they're not mutually exclusive. It's just the beauty of life.
Right. That's such a fascinating way to examine this, because it becomes all the more obvious in an island setting that exactly what you said, shared backgrounds, shared communities, and a common outcome of prosperous or not at the end of the day, and prosperous across the board. Here in Newport, there's a lot of competing interests. There's interests who are driven exclusively by money, that they say, hey, look, we'll literally buy houses and turn them into micro hotels, Airbnbs, what short-term rentals. Doesn't matter if anybody can afford to live on this island from a rental or purchase standpoint. We're kings here. We're going to make our money. And those competing interests have really been like tectonic plates shifting out from under the island of Newport. And it's the only way that a community like Newport could survive, it seems, based on what you're saying, is that understanding that yeah, you've got to at some level work together because you're out here on your own as a community.
Absolutely. And I think that is still we're still in the same question. How does a part belong to the whole? How does one individual belong to a community? And of course, when I say community, I mean a community of place. And so, the word politics, which is kind of a negative word these days, it seems, but it simply means how do we collectively navigate collective problems?
Right.
And I think that comes to maybe collaboration is too high a bar to start with, but can we just start with coordination? I think who a place, take a place. Who does it belong to? Well, it belongs to the people who live there, first and foremost. And the most important thing that we can do in the places we live is figure out some kind of way to steward it. And the most productive way to come together is figuring out how to steward the shared economy.
Right. What an interesting and essential conversation for this community here in Newport, and something that'll be elevated even more so on April 8th. The conversation, a framework for community economic stewardship, learnings from Fogo Island. And this is, again, April 8th. It's presented by Renewport at Salve Regina. And anybody who's looking for information on this, I invite you to visit Renewport, one word, Renewport, obviously, because it's a web address, renewport.org. As we sign off here today, Zita, what's your message? When you look back on the work that you've done, which has been a real sense of it documents migration, sense of place, sense of origin, all of these major themes. And at the end of the day, it's both anthropological and there's so many. You are ultimately covering a lot of terrain. For somebody who's walking down the street in Newport right now, who says, "Hey, I heard this interview on Newport this week with Zita Cobb," and they say, "Who's Zita Cobb?" How do you want people to describe you, and how do you want to be framed out, so to speak? Because you really have such a diverse and wide message. How do you want people to know you?
I maybe that an innovator around place and the role of place in human life. I start from, well, life itself, which needs place. Place holds nature and culture.
Yeah.
And humans, at least all the ones I've met so far, are embodied, meaning physical creatures. We have to live in a place. We are meaning seeking creatures
Mhm.
and we are social creatures. Therefore, we need place and we need each other. And
Yes.
we start from there. We have to start together.
Truer words never spoken as we start to see every study in the world, it seems, telling us we're more separated, isolated, lonesome, and divided. And this is, again, this is one of those conversations that, again, head to renewport.org. You're not going to want to miss this. This is a major, major opportunity happening in your backyard, Newport people. Zita, thank you so much for your time today.
I'll see you next week.